Hey there, educator. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Lanisha, and I'm all about helping educators make meaningful connections in math instruction. If you've ever attended one of my live professional development sessions, then you know how truly passionate I am about this teacher life. PD for the Soul is my space for providing professional development on the go, where you can take what you need and place the rest on the shelf for another day. New episodes drop every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is where we will dive into strategies, routines, and insights to help students build deeper understanding. And here's something new. Our monthly newsletter launches on March 1st. This will be your go-to spot for links to all resources we discuss on the podcast. I want you to have everything in one place. Plus, I'll share the books that will shape upcoming solo episodes in case you want to read along. But that's not all. The newsletter will also explore connections across domains and grade levels, because when we keep those connections at the core of our instruction, we give students the tools to make generalizations that make new concepts more accessible. So, hit subscribe, stay connected, and let's make math happen. See you in the episode. Hey there, educators. Welcome back to another episode of PD for the Soul. I'm so glad you're here today because what we're diving into is the heart of what makes or breaks a student's ability to thrive in the math classroom. And that's their ability to retain and generalize what they're learning. We are up against a serious opponent, the forgetting curve. And if it was strong back when Ebbinghaus did his research, back in the 1800s, imagine how much stronger it is now with all the distractions students face every single day. Building and maintaining retention is more critical than ever, but there's good news. We can fight back. Today's episode is all about how building mathematical generalizations can help students hold on to and deepen their understanding, and why it's time we start focusing on going a mile deep rather than a mile wide. So let's get into it. A common challenge I see across the math classrooms in the district I support is knowledge retention. We all know mathematics builds from one grade level to another, more specifically from one concept to another. A student who isn't retaining previous content isn't going to be well prepared for what's coming next. I've mentioned Ebbinghaus in previous episodes, and he deserves another mention today. He was a German psychologist who was the first to really start studying memory and forgetting. He recorded his findings graphically, looking for patterns of retention. What he found was this: 1 hour after learning something new, we only remember about 44% of it. A day later, that drops to just 33%. This is why we synthesize during lessons and again at the end of the lesson. It's why we recall previous days' learning before diving into new objectives. It's also why spiral review and space practice are crucial, because they're some of the best ways to slow down that natural forgetting process. I'm emphasizing natural because, it's just a part of who we are. Normally, when people talk about the forgetting curve, they immediately jump to space practice. But today, I want to take a different approach. I want to talk about building generalizations. In a previous episode, I shared a probability example, how multiplying two fractions, both less than 1/2 but greater than 0, results in a product that's smaller than either factor. That realization didn't come from being told. It came from experience, from noticing patterns across multiple examples. That's the power of generalizations. When students have meaningful experiences, they can start to connect the dots across situations, weaving threads that hold their mathematical thinking together. I love when students ask me, is this always true? It shows me they're searching for a pattern, a connection. That curiosity is golden. Unfortunately, sometimes they try to take the shortcut and just ask for the answer. And honestly, it's tempting to just tell them. But when we hand students the generalizations, we rob them of the experience that makes those generalizations stick. Bush, Karp, and Daugherty, authors of The Math Pact, they cite Ellis, an article or a work from 2011, and he describes generalizations as identifying commonalities across multiple examples or cases, extending reasoning, and deriving general ideas or results from specific examples. And importantly, these generalizations should stem from students' experiences, not from being told. So it isn't about us telling students, this is what's always going to happen. And I've caught myself doing this in a recent week. It's about students exploring more mathematics and starting to see those patterns and those connections on their own. When students experience those patterns and relationships firsthand, their understanding is way deeper than just memorizing a rule. And again, citing Ebbinghaus, we already know we're prone to forgetting. Last fall, I facilitated a professional development session focused on helping teachers differentiate between generalizations, rules, and overgeneralizations. And let me tell you, it was tough, even for adults. The differences are slight, but they matter. Here's a quick breakdown. Generalizations happen in stages. Students notice a pattern, they form a conjecture, which is like a guess or a suspicion, and eventually prove it to be true across multiple cases. Some examples could be all circles are similar, or a system of two linear equations can have 0, 1, or an infinite number of solutions. Rules, on the other hand, are given to students. They aren't discovered. Rules are shortcuts to solutions. They may work, but students don't understand why they work, and they often expire. An example is the solution to a linear inequality points in the same direction as the inequality sign. We know that is not always true. Another example is, as a quadrilateral's area increases, so does its perimeter. Well, that might be true in some cases, but it's not true in all cases. So we don't want to give those students those rules. Overgeneralizations are misapplied rules or ideas that aren't actually true. An example could be, the farther a number is from 0, the larger the number is. Nope, because once we get into negative numbers, we can have a number that's far from 0, but that doesn't mean that it's larger than the number that we're comparing it to, right? Another example is, improper fractions should always be rewritten as mixed numbers. No, they shouldn't, because once we get to 8th grade and we start to talk about slope, that slope is going to look real weird as a mixed number, right? So to avoid these pitfalls, we have to be super intentional in how we plan lessons, how we present tasks, and how we give students the time and space to explore more math. That's a hashtag that I came up with during Math and Statistics Awareness Month, because we seriously have to give students more time to work with the mathematics and start to understand how things are connected. So again, hashtag explore more math. And we're doing this so we're not pressured to feed them shortcuts that might later trip them up. Bush, Karp, and Daugherty also share 2 powerful ways to support students in building generalizations. One way is reversibility task. We give the students the answer and have them to construct the problem. Flexibility task, on the other hand, is where we present problems that allow multiple solution methods or highlight relationships across the problems. They also recommend generalization task, where students find and formalize a pattern from multiple examples or apply a generalization to find specific cases. These strategies aren't about doing more, they're about going deeper. So again, if you haven't gotten the math pack yet, please go get it. I'm not getting any proceeds from this. I'm not into any affiliate marketing or anything like that. It's just some really good stuff that's in the book that I feel like we all could benefit from learning, reading more about it, and just diving deeper and implementing these things in our classroom. So let's put all of this together. Let's think about generalizations and about the forgetting curve. If you work in a district like mine, where maybe 50% or more of your students aren't on grade level when they walk into your classroom, you're already starting behind. And the forgetting curve, on top of that, it's clear we can't afford to teach math an inch deep and a mile wide. Instead, we have to slow down. We've got to offer students rich, layered experiences that allow them to wrestle, explore, discover, and generalize. So they're not just memorizing for today, but building connections that will last. Some ways to support that, because, I want to give you guys some things that you can kind of walk away with and immediately impact. Now, obviously, I know it's the end of the school year, so you won't be immediately putting some things into place now because you're going home for the summer. But as you start to plan next year, I want you to think about, how can we start off in a way that we can hold out? How can we start off strong so that by the time we're here next year, you feel way more impactful? And I also want you to take some time to pat yourselves on the back because you've made it through this school year. So way to go, teach a friend. So some ways to support this is to understand the threads that connect concepts across grade levels for yourself. So an example could be using ratio language consistently, even when we're working with percentages and probability. Now, when I say even when we're working with, although we see percentages fall under ratios and proportions, a lot of times I've seen teachers try to teach students a whole different strategy whenever they get into percentages, instead of really emphasizing that a percentage is a rate per 100. So we can scale. We can use equivalent ratios to help us find parts and wholes with regard to percentages. So if we're being consistent with that language, students have the ability to see the ratio language over and over again and see how widely applicable it is, right? Then even when we're talking about probability, when we're talking about the chances of a desired outcome in comparison to the total number of outcomes, that's a ratio again. So making sure that students understand that. And again, it gives them another opportunity to see that ratio language. Another example, connecting proportional side lengths to slope. In some curriculums, they start with geometry, specifically transformations. And I'm talking about 8th grade here. They start with transformations before they go into linear relationships and slope. And I had never thought of that before working with this curriculum. And to me, it was chef's kiss. When you think about dilations and what it means in a dilation, right? Those proportional side lengths, and then you relate that to slope. Oh man. Because now when we're talking about slope or when we're reviewing dilations, we can now have an opportunity to review something else, right? We are now increasing the number of times that we see these concepts because we're layering them. We are emphasizing and leveraging the connections between the two. Yet another example is representing angle measures with algebraic expressions to bridge geometry and algebraic thinking. So now not only are we looking at the relationships between angles when we're talking about alternate interior, alternate exterior, verticals, those supplementary angles, we're now practicing solving equations as well. So again, we're increasing the amount of times that students are exposed to specific concepts by layering them. Now, that is how we can really leverage threading, the connections across those concepts to help students build generalizations, but also reduce that forgetting rate. Another way that we can support students is by anchoring their learning with charts. When a student builds a generalization, make it a big deal. Put it on an anchor chart, add their name to it, put it on the wall, celebrate their thinking, and then refer back to it often. And when I say often, I mean as often as you possibly can. Now, we're going to get into some space practice. I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast. I've referenced a previous podcast that I've listened to where they talk about it as well. I really am going to dive deep into that this summer, and I've already started kind of creating a calendar where teachers can drop in different concepts that they're working on, and it automatically populates the date that you need to go back to it. Because we have to get in the habit of really leveraging that space practice to help students remember those things, but we'll get into that at a later date. My point here is when those students see a generalization, when we've given them an opportunity to explore more math, and through that experience, they've now seen that pattern, they have created a conjecture, they have now seen that it is widely applicable across multiple representation, multiple situations. Oh, I'm about to make you stand on business. I'm going to amplify your voice by adding what you found to the anchor chart, and we're putting it up. And we're going to talk about it every single chance we get so that we let all the other students know how important it is to see patterns. We're teaching students to see patterns, and we're going to be proud that they figured them out. That's how we beat the forgetting curve, and that's how we build lasting math thinkers. We've been complaining about students being disengaged. We're complaining about students being apathetic. Well, we got to give them opportunities to really be in the learning, right? They're not in the back seat. They're not on the passenger side. They are driving. So we have to give those experiences so that they can learn how to drive, right? Because if I don't understand the information, if I don't know the information, it's going to be hard for me to really start to generalize. I got to have those experiences, those really rich experiences. Okay. So guys, next week, we're going to continue this conversation by diving into engagement and classroom management, because creating a space where students can explore deeply doesn't happen by accident. And we for sure know that it does not happen by default. It's intentional, it's strategic, and when done well, it makes all the difference. And again, it's really important that we have this conversation next because I've been sharing all these strategies with you guys. And as this school year comes to an end, and as you start to prepare for next school year, I'm hoping that you've already planned to kind of meet with your teams at school and talk about what went well, pat yourselves on the back, celebrate yourselves because you made it, but also thinking about what adjustments needs to be made for next year. Go ahead and have those reflections even before you go home for the summer. That way this summer, you are more so working towards what are the things I want to put in place? I've already kind of done the reflection. Now I'm working towards what are the key things that I want to incorporate so that next year is an even better year. And with me sharing all of these different ideas, we got to make sure that the classroom management is locked in, because it's going to be hard for you to do all of these other things if you don't have that community, if you don't have that culture in that classroom that is safe. If students don't feel like this is a space that they can take risk in, everything else kind of falls on deaf ears. So we got to get into that conversation, and we have to do it before May is over, so you have an opportunity to reflect before you go home for the summer. Now, until then, I want you to keep focusing on depth over breadth. We got to go deep. We have to go deep, guys, instead of just going wide. And I know it's difficult because we have pacing, we have district expectations. I understand all of that. But another thing that I want us to get into as well is how we can leverage those connections that I mentioned earlier to really still cover what we need to cover, but doing it in a deep way. Doing it in a way that really maximizes students' understanding versus we're just checking the box and getting through it because the pacing says we got to move on. But we'll get into that on another date. I want you guys to keep building those rich experiences for your students. I want you to keep fighting the forgetting curve, because it is definitely a fight. I get it. I'm right there with you. But I want you to know that the work that you're doing truly matters, and you're not alone. You are not alone. So until we get into that conversation in a couple weeks about classroom management, I want you to take care of yourself, okay? We will talk soon. P.S. I've got a reflection journal coming your way soon, and it's designed to help you turn these ideas that you've been hearing about on each episode into action. It's free and it's powerful. More details coming soon. And if today's episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a colleague, someone who's ready to make math happen. I want us to grow together, so I'll see you and your colleague next week.